Hey, what is up, motos? It is TCCrew here with another video for you. Welcome to part 14 of What If Deku Was a Viltrumite. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying, sit back and relax, you're in for a treat. So we begin. The final exams all ended much smoother than expected. Most students ended up passing, while some still had a few things to work on. Both Bakugo and Izuku were given a medical treatment after their exam, for they had not come out unscathed. Class 1A were then informed that they would attend a training camp, regardless if they passed the exam or not. The students got excited after hearing this, as they immediately began planning. Meanwhile, however, something particular was happening at UA. The students had all left, including those that needed medical attention, which left the building to just the teachers. Aizawa and Nezu walked down the halls, both wearing a rather alarming expression as they made their way to Recovery Girl's office. They were deep in thought, thinking about the possibilities for what was about to happen as they slowly slid the door open.
Took you long enough.
The old heroine said right as the two heroes entered the room.
Sorry, it took longer than expected to get everyone out.
Nezu responded, sounding rather calm. The room fell silent after this, as the two heroes slowly approached before asking.
Well, what do you have?
Recovery Girl cleared her throat in response to this, bringing up a few pages on her computer screen before saying,
I've analyzed the DNA sample I took from Midoriya earlier, but there's a lot to unpack. Where do you want to start?
With a more serious tone, both Aizawa and Nezu noticed this change, but they didn't let it affect them as the former spoke up. Let's start with his quirk. I used my eraser on him during the first day, but it had no effect. Either he's immune to it, or his quirk is odd. The tired teacher said with an equally tired voice. Recovery Girl didn't change her expression as she responded by saying,
I already looked for that, and I couldn't find anything.
With the same serious tone. Aizawa was confused now, as he asked, What do you mean? That you couldn't find anything to suggest an immunity to my quirk? With a voice that showed his confusion, the old nurse took a deep breath before she explained.
I couldn't find anything to suggest that he has a quirk at all. According to all tests, the boy should be quirkless.
Both Aizawa and Nezu were frozen now, for they didn't know how to react to this. Their immediate thought was that Recovery Girl must have made some sort of mistake, but her expression told them that there was no mistake. An unnerving silence filled the room once more before Recovery Girl cleared her throat. The other two jumped from this as she continued to speak.
There's more to it than that, because his DNA doesn't fully add up. At first, it looked just like that of any other human. But upon closer look, it isn't. Whatever it is, it can't be from this world.
She said, sending more waves of shock throughout the room. The other two didn't know how to react to this. Their first thought after hearing that Izuku was quirkless was that he must be an alien. But they didn't think that actually would be the case.
It gets better or worse because I ran a multitude of tests on his cells.
Recovery Girl then said, knocking both heroes out of their shock as she continued.
I gave it everything. Drugs, bacteria, viruses, even radiation. And it didn't even put a scratch on them. I don't know what kind of cells he has, but they just won't die.
The old nurse said, her voice sounding like it was shocked as the other two. No one in the room knew how to feel about this, for it was far too baffling. Not only was Izuku quirkless, he was supposedly an alien. Not only that, he was immortal for all they knew. Their simple desire to unveil the secret behind their student's remarkable power led to an answer, but now they didn't know what else to expect from him.
If what you're saying is true, we'll need to keep a watchful eye on him. And perhaps we need to think of something special for the training camp.
Nezu then said, his voice slowly returning to its usual self. Everyone agreed to this, as Aizawa added, "Definitely. If he's as strong as you say he is, we'll most certainly need his help in the future." With his usual tired voice.
We might need it sooner than later, assuming that we can actually trust him.
Recover Gold then said, her voice sounding far more serious than before. Both Aizawa and Nezu were once again confused as the old nurse continued.
All Might's time limit has been severely lowered, and it's because Midoriya struck him in his weak spot. It may have been an accident, but we can't afford to take the risk.
Now the room was dead silent. One could have heard a falling leaf hit a mattress. They didn't want to think that their student couldn't be trusted, but there was the risk. If Izuku didn't know about All Might's injury and accidentally hit him there, they had nothing to worry about. But if it turned out that he had known about All Might's weak spot and still chose to strike him there, knowing what it would do, it changes things. The three teachers stood in a long mutual silence, all thinking about one mutual thought. Could they actually trust Izuku Midoriya? Some time passed, and it was finally time for the camp to begin. The students were given enough time to prepare, and some needed it more than others. Izuku once again had to convince his father to let him attend, which Nolan reluctantly agreed to. Class 1A were all seated on the bus, mingling with each other as they made their way to the supposed training ground. It took a while, but eventually the bus stopped, only to reveal that they were in the middle of nowhere. The students were all confused, wondering where they were exactly, but their thoughts were quickly stopped when a black car pulled up to reveal two members of the hero group called the Wild Wild Pussycats. Now everyone's confusion was overwhelmed by excitement as they carefully listened to what the heroes had to say. Izuku shared their excitement with everyone else, but his attention was quickly drawn elsewhere. The green-haired boy thought that he could see something beyond the thick forest as he made his way over to the cliff to try and get a better view. He was alone in his observations until Bakugo and Todoroki eventually joined his side. The three musketeers stood side by side in silence, not speaking or even moving a muscle as they scanned the vast forest. It was beautiful. Had no need for worry, with gentle winds passing by.
So, how have you been holding up, Todoroki?
Izuku then asked, turning to face the bicolored teen on his left. Todoroki was silent for a while, almost giving the impression that he didn't have an answer to this rather simple yet broad question. He then raised and looked at his still blistered and burned left hand as he responded by saying, "It's been rather tough on my family. They're probably far more lost and confused than me right now. As for my flames, I have a long way to go before I reach my desired goal." With his usually cold voice, as his eyes seemed to put more and more focus on his raised palm, both Bakugo and Izuku nodded in response to this, for they knew what their friend was talking about. They knew that Todoroki's mother and siblings had a complicated relationship with Endeavor, so they couldn't even begin to imagine what they were going through right now. As for the second part, its meaning was rather obvious.
Don't undermine your progress. You've come pretty far already. If we fought right now, you might actually give me some trouble.
Izuku then said, as a smile crept on him. Todoroki's response to this was a smile of his own, but none of them got to say anything before Bakugo intervened.
"Oh, please! He won't ever be able to put a scratch on you before I do another one,"
the blonde said, his voice sounding less agitated than it usually was. Izuku was only a little annoyed by this, but apparently he wasn't nearly as annoyed as his ice-using companion. That is very rich coming from a guy who broke his arms for a single drop of blood, Todoroki said, his voice clearly showing his annoyance. Bakugo did not like what he heard, as he responded.
The hell did you say, icy hot?
The blonde grunted, slowly regressing back to the ill-tempered bomb that they all knew. Bakugo was about to say something more, but was interrupted when he heard chuckling coming from Izuku.
What's so funny, Kaiju?
The bomb grunted, showing how little he appreciated Izuku's amusement. The invincible teen wiped a tear from his eye as he responded by saying,
It's nothing, Junior. I'm just surprised. I never thought that you would fight over me.
With a voice that was still joyous from his chuckles. Bakugo didn't like this at all, as he gritted his teeth while a horrendous bulge appeared on his forehead. Meanwhile, the rest of Class 1A was still with the newly arrived pros. They were all listening intently to Mandalay's explanation of the camp. But before she could get anywhere near the important bits, she was interrupted by the sound of an explosion in the background. Everyone jumped and instinctively turned towards it, only to see that a portion of the cliff's edge was missing. There was also a dust cloud, and through it they could see the vague silhouettes of 3 students falling over the edge. Both Mandalay and Pixie Bob were on the brink of panic upon seeing this, but they were then confused when realizing that they were alone in that fact. No one, neither student nor teacher, seemed to be alarmed by this in any way.
Don't worry about the 3 of them. They've been through far too much to die in such a pathetic way.
Aizawa then said, his voice being calm and tired as always. Mandalay was, of course, shocked by this, for it seemed that these types of events were normal to the teacher, but she quickly collected herself before saying,
All right, if you say so. I guess we better get started right away.
With a voice that sounded a little shell-shocked still. The students were all confused by this, but they didn't get to ask anything before a landslide suddenly threw them to join the 3 musketeers below. The students all crashed into the ground, grunting in pain as they did. Their first instinct was to look around for the others. That's when they found the fateful trio, Izuku, Bakugo, and Todoroki, were all floating just 1 centimeter over the ground, thanks to Izuku, who held the other 2 by the back of their shirts. The invincible teen put them both down gently, all while letting out a sigh of relief.
Thanks for the save, Midoriya.
Todoroki then said, while panting slightly. Izuku was about to respond to this, but he was quickly interrupted by Bakugo.
I didn't ask for your help,
the blonde said, grunting as he did. Izuku just sighed upon hearing this, as he responded by saying,
Yet you so desperately need it, Junior.
Bakugo almost seemed unaffected by this, as he said,
You're clearly delusional if you believe that, E.T.
With his usual voice, Izuku got visibly annoyed upon hearing this, and it looked like he was on the verge of just losing his mind as he said,
Listen, I'm fine with you calling me an alien. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. All I ask of you is to at least try and be consistent with it.
With a very angry voice, Bakugo just grinned upon hearing this, as he responded by saying,
What are you gonna do about it? Phone home?
With a smug voice, Izuku just grunted in response to this, desperately trying to keep his rage in. Meanwhile, their classmates were all in a disorganized panic, while being chased by what looked to be monsters made from mud. They all cried out for the blonde and the green net to help them, but they didn't hear any of it. They just stared at each other in silence until Bakugo's expression grew even more smug before saying,
Perhaps you'd prefer that I call you Xenomorph.
Izuku could no longer hold it in after hearing this. His anger had been boiling over for a long while, and now he was about to open the floodgates.
Do I look like a hideous monster with acidic blood?
The green-haired boy shouted, letting all his anger out verbally as he swung his arms outwards. Izuku wasn't paying any form of attention to his surroundings, therefore he didn't notice how his outstretched arm accidentally had destroyed a dirt monster that tried to sneak up on him. The now lifeless monster fell to the ground with a bang, almost landing on Ashido as it did.
Hey, be careful where you wave those things!
The pink-skinned girl shouted, her voice being both panicked and irritated. Izuku, on the other hand, still hadn't noticed that thing as he continued to stare Bakugo down.
What's that on your face?
The blonde then asked, while pointing towards a lump of dirt that had landed on Izuku's cheek. The greenette didn't change his expression as he wiped the dirt away while pointing at Bakugo and shouting,
Don't change the subject, Junior! We both know that I can kick your ass blindfolded and with only one arm and leg.
The blonde bombed in like this as he let out a wild one-for-all-powered explosion while shouting,
What the hell did you say? You damn rookie!
Back at Izuku. Bakugo was also oblivious to his surroundings, so he also failed to notice how he had destroyed another dirt monster with one of his stray explosions. This caused his classmates to yell at him to be more careful, for they had almost been hit by the blasts. But Bakugo didn't hear any of it, as Izuku then said,
Hey, what's that on your face?
as he pointed towards a lump of dirt on the blonde's cheek. Bakugo didn't calm down as he wiped the dirt while shouting,
Don't change the subject, Chewbacca!
Honey is a free browsing add-on available on Google, Opera, Firefox, Safari. If it's a browser, it has Honey. Honey automatically saves you money when you check out on sites like Amazon, Papa John's, Kohl's. Whenever you shop, it's a good chance that Honey can save you money. All you have to do when you're checking out at these major sites, click that little orange button and it will scan the entire internet and find discount codes for you. It takes 2 clicks to install Honey. Now, anytime you check out, Honey will scan the entire internet and find coupon codes for you. If there is a coupon code, they will find it. And if there is not a coupon code, you can rest assured that you are getting the best price possible, and there literally is not one available on the internet. If you install Honey right now, you can save like $50 to $100 on your shopping, doing nothing. There's literally no reason not to install Honey. It takes 2 clicks. 10 million people use it. 100,000 5-star reviews. Unless you hate money, you should install Honey. The 2 angry teens continued their long and very pointless argument for the entirety of the way. They always destroyed something by accident, all while being completely oblivious of their surroundings. The argument itself just consisted of fighting over who was better, with Bakugo eventually speaking as if Izuku was the foreigner who didn't understand what he was saying. This all led to the blonde speaking like a caveman by the time that they actually reached the campsite. And by that point, Izuku was just over it.
Okay, listen. Every time you open your mouth, at least 20 of your brain cells come flying out. If it was possible to have a negative number of those, you'd be about minus 5,000. Do you still wish to continue?
The green net then said, heavily emphasizing that he has had enough. Bakugo responded to this by returning to his usual speech and saying,
I'll let you off the hook this time, Grogu.
with a much calmer voice now. Izuku just grunted in response to this, not having enough energy to get annoyed anymore. The duo then turned their expressions towards their classmates, finally acknowledging their existence before asking, "What the hell happened to you guys?" While noticing how beat up they looked, the class all irritated upon hearing this, as Ashido decided to speak for everyone.
Are you kidding me? We had to bust our asses to avoid getting hit by monsters and, worst of all, the two of you!
The pink-skinned girl shouted, and almost the entire class nodded in agreement to this clearly justified anger. The duo only seemed to get more confused upon hearing this, as Izuku then asked,
Wait, there were monsters out there?
well, sounding like he had no idea what was happening. Everyone was seriously baffled by how oblivious they were, as Kuroshima answered the question. "Well, not anymore. You guys destroyed them all during your argument." Izuku and Bakugo didn't know how to react to this, but another question was raised when they looked towards Todoroki. The bicolored teen didn't look nearly as banged up to the others, and looked like he had followed them around all the time.
Todoroki, you followed right behind them the entire time without any issues. Why didn't you even try to stop their argument so that they could have helped us?
Ruka then asked the ice user, sounding just as irritated as the others. Todoroki looked as cold as always, until he grinned and said,
Honestly, their argument was just too funny, so I decided to watch instead.
With a slight chuckle, everyone, including Izuku and Bakugo, were shocked to hear this, for it did not sound like something that Todoroki would do. That shock was short-lived, however, as Ruka responded to this by saying,
I want to hurt you! All three of you!
with a voice that showed that she was both serious and very angry. Izuku was thrown off by this, but he quickly collected himself before looking around and said,
Sure, but you'll have to wait in line.
with a calm and almost tired voice. He wasn't wrong with this statement, for it looked like almost everyone wanted to hurt the three of them in some way now. An awkward silence filled the air amongst the students until Bakugo broke it by sighing and saying,
Well, that was a pathetic start to the camp.
with a voice that sounded similar to Izuku's. The green net also sighed upon hearing this as he responded.
We finally agree on something, Junior.
All three of the musketeers then proceeded onwards, completely ignoring the angry glares they got from their classmates. The next day, Class 1A woke up early and gathered in a training field outside. Almost everyone was half awake and could barely pay any attention as Aizawa spoke.
Alright, class. This training camp is designed to make you all stronger. You've been through a lot, as such you have grown mentally. But physically you haven't improved nearly as much. Of course, there are a few wild exceptions amongst you.
The tired teacher said, his voice being its usual calm self. The class was still a little drowsy, but they nodded in response. Aizawa scanned all of his students until his gaze landed on Izuku. The green-haired boy noticed how he was at the center of his teacher's attention as he got a ball tossed towards him.
Midoriya, you know what to do. Anything goes as long as you stay within the circle. And I wanted to remind you that there's no height limit, so don't hold back this time.
Aizawa then said, right as Izuku caught the ball. Izuku was a little confused upon hearing this, but he quickly understood what Aizawa meant and proceeded onwards. He entered the ring and stood still for a while before he began to float. The class didn't understand what Izuku was saying. They would have understood if he had just used his flight to push off the ground, but the green-haired boy was flying much higher than the treetops at the moment. They all watched as Izuku eventually stopped to float in mid-air before reeling his fist back and threw the softball with all of his might. The throw created a massive wind blast, one that even the students could feel, as the ball vanished in the distance.
Where did it go?
Kirishima then asked, his voice sounding rather curious. More students had this question in mind, for they were all still waiting for a ball that should have landed ages ago. They all waited in silence for a few more seconds, until they could hear a weird noise. As if on cue with the sound, Izuku turned a full 180 degrees to face it before raising his hand. Everyone was once again confused until a loud crash followed by another blast of wind appeared. The entire class was staggered by this, but they would freeze up even more when they looked upon to see what had caused this event.
Are you kidding me?
Kirishima shouted in bewilderment, outright refusing to believe that this was real. The class seemed to share those feelings as they watched the smoking hand of the seemingly unaffected and unchanged Izuku. The flying teen was holding onto the ball that he had just thrown, and it was smoking from the friction. Izuku then gently blew onto the heated ball before he slowly descended back to the earth.
No way! Did he just...
Ashido then uttered, but she didn't get to finish her question before Izuku responded.
throw the ball a full lap across the earth with what appears to be no effort? Yes.
He said with a voice that was both cool and calm. The class was stunned, unable to fully process what they just saw. But they didn't get to do any of that as Aizawa spoke.
Good. That means I won't have to expel you. Moving on. As I said earlier, this camp is meant to help you improve physically. Midoriya may not have been a good example on my point, but use him as motivation to get stronger.
The tired teacher said to his students, sounding like he was unaffected by Izuku's performance. The class just shouted in response to this, as all determined to get stronger. But Izuku wasn't sharing that sentiment.
So, if I'm their motivation to grow stronger, what am I supposed to do? Now that I think about it, what exactly can you do to help me improve?
The Invincible teen asked, sounding like he was genuinely curious about what his teacher had in mind. The class seemed to agree with Izuku, for they couldn't really think of anything that could put him through a struggle, except for fighting two of the strongest heroes on Earth. Aizawa was, once again, unaffected by this as he said,
Don't worry, I haven't forgot about you.
With an unchanged voice, now Izuku was even more curious, wondering what exactly his teacher had in mind. His answer would come almost immediately, though, as someone else joined the scene. Out from the trees behind Aizawa, they could see Tiger dragging a bag across the dirt as he approached them all. The students were now confused once more, as the panting and sweaty pro hero finally made its way to Aizawa's side.
Eraserhead, get a truck next time you want to transport something as heavy as this.
The clearly exhausted pro said, as he wiped the sweat from his forehead. Aizawa didn't say anything in response to this, as he just grunted as he pointed towards Izuku. Tiger crawled upon seeing this, as he lifted the bag up with trembling arms and tried to hand it over to the student.
Come on, what's in this bag that you struggle to carry so bad?
The green-haired boy said as he received the bag from Tiger, but cut himself off after what happened next. The other students were asking the same question about the contents of the bag, but they were all equally shocked by what happened.
Have fun, kid. It's your burden now.
Tiger then said before leaving the training field. Everyone was still in deep shock, for they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Izuku had received the bag, fully confident that he could carry whatever Tiger struggled with. But that is not what happened. The second that the hero had let go, the bag crashed to the ground and made a crater, almost dragging Izuku down with it. No one knew how to process this. Izuku Midoriya, the kid that fought against All Might, the kid that just threw a softball across the entire planet, The kid that could call himself invincible without it being bowstring struggled to lift this bag? Izuku's shock only served to amplify his curiosity as he opened the bag. What he saw inside made him sweat even more as he looked towards his teacher.
We'll start easily, then we'll add more and more until I see you sweat.
Aizawa then said, his voice showing a menacing tone. His gaze then left the terrified Izuku and instead landed on the equally terrified remainder of Class 1A. He scanned them all before he, with the same terrifying voice, said,
Let the training camp officially begin.
Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you enjoyed. Before you leave, we'd just like to let you know that We Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description. So feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video. So goodbye, and have a divine day.